welcome back to my channel. My name is In It For The Spooks, and tonight I will be your narrator. I will be reading stories off of the Am I the Asshole, Let's Not Meet, Petty Revenge, Pro Revenge, Nuclear Revenge, and Am I the Devil subreddits. The last story was originally posted on the Regretful Parent sub, but got cross-posted over to Am I the Devil. I know it's been a long time since I last posted a narration video. Jeez, a whole year. But there is a reason for that. I have a degree now. Y'all, I was gonna use my cap and put it on, but it's like wet on the bottom, so I didn't do that, so I just did my cords instead. It's only an associate's degree, but it is an associate's degree in forensic science. I've also been working on my writing a lot. Look out for narrations of those coming soon. But yeah, anyway, I've worked my butt off the past 2 years, and I'm extremely proud of myself. That being said, I am taking the summer off before continuing my studies, and now I'll have more time to make and upload videos, both narrating and in person. I've even got a list. It's so long, it's 2 pages. Now that you've gotten that little life update, let's get on with the video. My daughter came out to me and wants us to cut ties with my conservative parents while I try to find a middle ground solution without breaking my family apart. Using a throwaway account for obvious reasons. For context, we live in a traditional part of a first world country that has not yet fully normalized and accepted queerness. Children 18 plus that are still living with their parents is normalized, which is why my daughter still lives with me. I'm retired. She works a part-time job and goes to college at the same time. Today, my daughter, 25, let's call her Jane, fake name obviously, came out to me, 55 female, widow, as gay, and I need advice on how to proceed. I know I can just Google it, but I'm seeking more specific direct advice. I obviously told her that I support her and she'll still be my daughter no matter what, but here's the thing. I've been raised by extremely religious and conservative parents, 75 male and 73 female, who do not tolerate the queer community. Jane knows this and believes we should both just cut ties with them. She even went on a rant about how family is the one you choose, not one that is picked for you. So there's a conflict here. I'm willing to defend Jane no matter what from anything my parents might try to say to dehumanize her, but they are still my parents, and I do not wish to cut ties with them. But at the same time, I do not want to upset Jane. So I came up with a sort of middle ground solution. I can try to change their worldview. Right now, they don't know about her. However, tomorrow, they're visiting for personal reasons, irrelevant to the post. So I expect a whole debate to start like it always does when they visit. But this time, it's way different and more personal since Jane is now openly lesbian. And I want to try to change their worldview and try to get them on the same page as her, who isn't making things easy since she's as hostile to them as they are to gay people and potentially to her. That's when problem number 2 arises. Jane believes they're not going to change and will further try to find a way to criminalize her. I told her they're my parents and it's not fair for me to cut ties with the people that raised and fed me until I was able to walk on my own. That's when she went on the rant about family being the people that you choose. I ended the conversation by changing the subject entirely to bide some time. So I came to post this in hopes that someone might help me find a way to make both parties happy without causing my family to break up. And she's probably right about OP's parents not changing. More likely than not, it is possible that they may see the error of their ways, change their minds, and accept their granddaughter. It's not impossible, but it is so unlikely that it may as well be treated as impossible, especially when they have the capacity to cause great harm before any doors are closed on them. Only saving grace here is that OP's daughter is an adult, not a teenager. So if the grandparents try to coerce OP into disowning her own child and kicking her out, at least the young woman should theoretically be able to find a way to house herself, when a teenager might not be able to. Though I hope that if push comes to shove, OP will do the right thing and choose her daughter over her parents. But based on what OP said about not being able to live with peace of mind if her parents disowned her, I have my doubts. I suspect she would choose her parents. And then OP replies, I'm willing to defend her if they verbally abuse her. She's my daughter after all. But if I get disowned for that, I don't think I can live out the rest of my life with the peace of mind. Yet again, it's really a lose-lose situation. I'm gonna hope for the best, unfortunately. Update. My daughter came out to me and wants us to cut ties with my conservative parents while I try to find a middle ground without breaking my family apart. So my parents came, everything was going well, but then my mom said something questionable about my daughter's foreign college friend, which sparked an argument between all 3 of them. In the heat of the moment, Jane came out to them. One thing led to another, and my dad made a snarky remark which prompted me to intervene. This started a shouting match between my parents and I while Jane stood aside and seemed nervous. She told me to stop, but I couldn't. It was already too late. My parents made even more homophobic comments, and I started the personal attacks. At this point, Jane was in another room, and while things calmed down, I went to check on her and saw her crying. We started talking. In the end, she admitted she was going to cut ties with me, but decided against it since she really trusts me but still feels guilty. Reassured her that everything is going to be alright. In the end, she told me she wants to invite her girlfriend over, who she's been dating for 2 years now, and only felt safe doing so now that she knows I fully support her. Back to my parents, they still seem to be giving me the silent treatment, but they left. Guess that's the last time I'll see them here. Not sure what's going to happen. I'll try to mend things between me and them, but at least my daughter now feels safer, which is what matters. Too long didn't read, parents came and left. An argument sparked, which made Jane come out in the heat of the moment. I stood by her, had a shouting match with my parents, who are now giving me the silent treatment, but my daughter seems to trust me a lot more, which is great, seeing as I risked getting cut out by her, according to her. I questioned the last sentence. Why should you be responsible for managing the feelings of your parents? They have shown you they cannot love your child without restrictions, so why are you doing all the work to maintain the relationship? Give it time and see how you feel not having to manage these grown adults. You might actually prefer it. OP replied, I'm not so sure, to be honest. It's this thing where I feel I must fix things between us. I know it doesn't make sense, but it's like an urge. Guess I'll get over it, as you said. Hell, as harsh as it may seem, they'll be dead in a few years, so doubt it will matter that much anyways. Besides, you make a good point. My daughter is all I hold dear in this world, so if they don't want to support her, so be it. It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. That urge is probably the years of indoctrination. Your parents have raised you to put their feelings first and have made you responsible for fixing it when they break the relationship. I'm guessing you're a people pleaser in general because of this. Learning how to resist that and deal with the inevitable guilt is one of the hardest things to do when you've been through this form of parentification. It's an essential step in learning how to set healthy boundaries for ourselves. But holy hell, is it a struggle to break those years, decades, of well-established patterns. Just had the creepiest experience of my life while camping. By Yeehaw Batman. I discovered the subwall with my friend Julia, who is with me as I'm typing this out because we just got back from a camping trip where we experienced the scariest thing either of us have ever experienced. So Julia and I are both women in our early 20s, and we were out camping in a remote area of Montana that isn't super popular, but it's still fairly popular amongst locals who camp a lot like we do. It meant it wasn't super unusual when we saw a group of 3 guys who looked to be a little older than us drive past our camp about an hour after we set up our chairs and table. We just assumed that they were searching for a good spot to camp. But then when the car was still in our sight through the trees, we saw it turn around, and as it was driving back, we both noticed one of the guys sticking his phone out the window and seemed to be recording us. Both of us thought it was really weird, and I walked a bit closer to take a picture of the license plate as a safety measure, but when I got closer, I saw that the back plate had all the numbers covered with black paint. Julia and I both got bad vibes from this, but both of us are aware that men are creeps towards women all the time, and both of us are prepared with bear spray because Montana is grizzly bear country, and we decided it wasn't a weird enough interaction to pack our stuff and find a different spot. We just decided to put up an empty tent outside and sleep in my car instead, to trick people into thinking we were sleeping in the tent if they tried to attack us. Later that night, when both of us were asleep in my car, we heard branches rustling and snapping outside by the empty tent, despite the fact that it wasn't windy. Originally, we assumed it was a bear trying to climb up to the bear hang with our food and scented hygiene products. Then we heard male voices outside, and I lifted my head up to the window and saw the same car that passed us earlier. I got off the air mattress on top of the back row of seats that we put down to make an area for us to sleep, and locked the doors individually so my car wouldn't make a beeping noise. Julia and I stayed still and hoped that the men would leave. For a while we heard them talking, but it was hard to make out what they said from inside the car. We heard more rustling and branches snapping, which made us think they were trying to steal something from the bear hang, which was weird. Neither of us wanted to actually look out the window in case one of them spotted us. Eventually we heard the car leave, which was a huge relief. But we were too freaked out to actually leave the car until it was light outside and campers nearby would be waking up. When I got out, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Above our tent, the men had hung a dead deer that was obviously killed recently because it was leaking blood everywhere on top of our tent. The internal organs were ripped out and its limbs were cut off and laid out in a circle around the tent. This is messed up on its own, but hunting permits aren't even being sold right now, which means that the deer was killed illegally due to whatever it is that those guys did. As soon as we processed what we were looking at, Julia and I freaked out and drove away without taking down our camp. Once we were in service, Julia called the police and Forest Service to report what happened while I drove home.
Forest Service was nice enough to get our stuff for us, but I don't even want mine back in case there's like some weird curse on it or something. The police are looking into it to charge a fine for killing wild game during the off season, but as far as I know, what they did to us technically isn't illegal. It's just really creepy. I haven't heard of anything like this before, but if you have, let me know. I'm very curious and very spooked. I love camping so much, but after this, I don't know if I can camp for a long time. To be honest, your friend and you handled this incredibly well. Just that you didn't get spooked enough to head out, especially after the picture showed the license plate was blacked out. Shows some serious courage. I'm just confused why you didn't lock the car doors right after you two were set up for bed. I was thinking of that too, but it sounds like it was just an oversight. When you're being vigilant about a possible dangerous situation, you normally don't overlook something like that. Having ADHD and being a recreational drug user myself, I understand how someone might forget to do something like that in everyday situations. However, ever since my apartment was robbed at gunpoint, door locking is ingrained AF. Even though they didn't get into our apartment because the door was unlocked at the time, it was a long story, and no, it was not drug deal related. Whether they were wide awake and stone cold sober or they were tired and drunk/high, I just don't understand how someone who is experiencing a moment of fear forgets to do something like that. I just hope that that aspect of the night was a moment of learning for them in the future. He felt entitled to my sister's body, so I felt inclined to get him fired and deported. By A-dubs. I, female 35, moved to the PNW, Canada to take a job. My sister, 36, female, was already living up here, and I missed her. I accepted the job before talking to my sister about it. Turns out her boyfriend, male 29, works there. When I get in town after driving 8 days straight, he shows up. I was irritated by this because it was such a long drive. I really only wanted to chill with my sister, who I hadn't seen in a couple years, and sleep. The following day, he came with us to put a deposit on a house and tried to insert himself into a 3-year lease. My sister had only known him 2 months. Totally catching bad vibes from this guy, my sister and I talked about it in depth and we were both on the same page about the living situation. But she was still interested in working on that relationship. Fine, I support her. I'll stay out of it. A couple weeks later, she admits that he's been acting strange since I moved up here and started working with him, demanding that my sister tell him things about me, demanding she give him her undivided attention at all times by encouraging her to cancel her sports and charity events. It gets worse when she confesses that when she said no to sex, he had a childish fit and yelled at her, demanding that she live up to the expectations of a relationship. So she breaks up with him. Thank God. Now I only have to see this bloke 5 days a week. He's blowing up left and right at work, making rookie mistakes. He's been there 8 months and hasn't really figured it out. We all work in sales. After the breakup, he asked me politely not to talk about my sister because it hurts him. Keep in mind that I'm not shoving it down his throat, but if someone asked me how my weekend was, I should be able to say, went to garage sales with my sister, without this guy having a mental breakdown. At this point, I was already planting seeds. I told him I will not answer any questions about my sister at work. It's inappropriate. He continued to not respect that boundary and ask questions anyway, so I encouraged him to reach out for my sister's friendship, knowing very well he would be rejected. I set him up with a female client meeting, knowing it would expose his general tendencies to behave horribly and be reported back to management. When he asked for recent figures of a project, sent him the old spreadsheet that had a link, larger than the title and above the title, to the actual records of figures. I knew he wouldn't read it. Who reads the note highlighted at the top in size 36 font anyway? He grabbed the figures from the bottom. This is important because this is how I put the nails in his coffin. We finalized a huge project. Upon review, we come to the conclusion that he was responsible for 0.09% of sales, 900 out of every 105,000. Moreover, when he presents the project to our manager, he provides the wrong figures. I'm in the review meeting and hold nothing back. With corporate on Teams, an entire sales force in the board meeting, I address his performances, behaviors, and his lack of professionalism. I make sure to include that he disregards women, pinpointing the bottom dollar of potential losses for recent interactions. I call him out for his lack of professionalism. If you're to present numbers/figures, you have to ensure accuracy when possible. And finally, I address his manipulative and control tactics in the office that clearly express his inability to professional and emotional boundaries. He cried. The boardroom went silent. I asked for his resignation. He stormed out. He left the office and returned the following day to find security next to his desk and an empty box. I smiled lightly at him while he was walking out. Listen, the only person who can be mean to my sister is me. I'm not shady. I'm loyal and vengeful. Since he quit, he wasn't able to meet the requirements for temporary citizenship/residency. He got deported. Sorry, not sorry. Too long, couldn't read, moved across country to live closer to my sister. The guy she was briefly dating when I came up here turned out to be a total asshole, demanding sex with my sister after saying no, trying to get her to quit things important to her. The ex-boyfriend and I ended up working for the same company. Slowly but surely, I got him to quit, and consequently, he was deported. Ruthless. Well played, bud. Well played. Slow clap. I feel like there should be an online class for this. Not all heroes wear capes. A lawyer's pro-revenge on a landlord by Called in the 90s. Landlords are assholes, generally speaking. Everyone knows that. But if you think residential landlords are bad, they're nothing compared to commercial landlords. Landlords of commercial buildings are some of the cruelest, nastiest people I've ever come across. This revenge tale is about a commercial landlord and how I dealt with him. Back in the 90s, sometimes I'd go for lunch at this restaurant in the basement of our building. The place was called The Vault because it had a massive bank vault that had always been there, dating back to the days before the place was turned into a restaurant. The vault was so huge that they could seat a couple of tables in there, and you could eat dinner surrounded by rows of old, gleaming safe deposit boxes. One day I was there for lunch, and the owner took me aside. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said. "The landlord drives everyone nuts." I was a subtenant in the same building, sharing space with an older lawyer, Aaron, and the landlord was always causing us trouble. I'd already had a few run-ins with him, and we hated each other on sight. In most jurisdictions, commercial landlords don't need court orders to get you out if you're late with the rent. Instead, they just change the locks, and you find out about it when you show up and your key doesn't work. Every time our landlord had a dispute with anyone, which was often, he'd always threaten to change the locks. He keeps demanding all this stuff for extra rent, and it's really weird because a lot of it's really old. The restaurant owner showed me a letter the landlord had served on him earlier that day. I looked over the demand and read a list of expenses for snow removal and parking lot repair and common area flooring and all kinds of crap going back years. I read it all the way to the end, and there it was, the usual clause saying he was going to change the locks if the tenant didn't pay this and do that. From the wording of the demand, it looks like you've been fighting a while. Why did you wait before consulting a lawyer? I asked one of the lawyers I know, and he said it's hopeless. He told me the lawyer's name. It was a guy I knew with a shitty real estate practice who'd resorted to taking little legal aid cases to keep the lights on when the market tanked in '89. "You do something to make the landlord hate you?" I asked. "Because this is a bit over the top, even for our asshole landlord. He knows I'm moving the restaurant. I think he's trying to grab as much money as possible before I go. Plus, he's giving me grief over the vault. He won't let you take it with you? Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons and I don't need it. But the lease says I have to remove it and that I also have to restore the building to what it was before there was a vault. That would cost a fortune. The asshole landlord says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he'll sue. Send your lease up to my office and let me look over it," I said. I finished my lunch, and when I got back to my office, the lease was waiting for me. It was just as bad as the restaurant owner said. The lease was a renewal of an assignment of a renewal. The original documents dating back shortly after World War II when a bank first leased the place and the vault was installed. Somehow the landlord had suckered the restaurant into taking over a lease that left him liable to remove a bank vault at the end of term. No big deal, I thought. The restaurant can default, and all the landlord can do is sue a shell company. But when I got to the last page of the lease, there was a guarantee clause. The restaurant owner had personally guaranteed the lease, and he was on the hook for moving a vault weighing 100 tons and then fixing the place up. It would cost a fortune. The case was hopeless. Of course, that was obvious right away, but then I thought about the asshole landlord with his demands and his threats and his rent hikes, and I asked my brain to do me a solid, which it promptly did. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant owner. "I'm fucked, right? You're calling me to say there's no way out?" That's what my commercial lawyer already said, but I just thought I'd ask. "I can save you, but it's gonna cost." "How much?" $5,000 in legals and another G note for the agent. "Agent? What kind of agent?" "Real estate. Send up a check certified and leave the rest to me." The check hit my desk in less than an hour. I went to Aaron's office. "I need a real estate agent," I said. "You buying a house?" "Nope." "Selling a house?" "Nope." By this point, I'd been sharing space with Aaron for almost 5 years, and he knew me pretty well. "You're pulling one of your stunts again?" he asked. "Yep, but nothing that will get you into trouble." I know a guy. Aaron knew all kinds of guys, and that's one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred. But he knew a guy, and he gave me the agent's name and number, and the next day I paid the agent a visit. I told him what I needed, and we agreed to terms. I gave him some papers and the cash for his fee. A few days later, I was again at the vault for lunch. The owner saw me walk in and greeted me himself. "The landlord's here," he said. "Why?" "For lunch. and to be an asshole. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face. He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. We're making demand on the landlord, I said, munching on spaghetti carbonara. Demand? What are we demanding? I pulled a document out of my briefcase and passed it to him while I sipped my wine. We're demanding that the asshole landlord release all the restaurant equipment, all the fixtures, the ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything you need to run a restaurant. The lease exempts all that stuff. He can't stop me taking what I want. The only thing that matters is the vault, and of course I don't want that. I shook my head. You need the vault, I said, and we're demanding that he release the bank vault as well. We're insisting that he let you take it out within 7 business days. You think you can beat the landlord with reverse psychology? You think if you treat him like a 2-year-old, you can manipulate him into doing what you want? We'll find out soon enough. He's had the demand for a couple days now. The restaurant owner dropped his wine glass and it shattered on the marble floor. You already gave it to him? The restaurant owner said. He got up, swung open the vault door, and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. Let's see what the landlord has to say, I told him, and we walked over to the landlord's table. The landlord was a big, beefy man with a big appetite. He sat alone, eating a rack of lamb wolfishly with his hands. My client needs an answer today, I said. The landlord looked up at me as he chewed noisily. I'm the vault's lawyer, I said. I gave you a demand the other day. My client needs an answer right now. He needs the vault for a new place, and he's got to make arrangements. Your client can forget about the bank vault, he said, wiping his massive greasy hands on an already spoiled napkin. But you can't do that, I said. My shock was feigned, but the restaurant owner's jaw dropped for real. The landlord laughed at us. I'm the landlord. I can do what I want. I'm gonna need that in writing, because my client might sue, I said. Sue all you like, the landlord told me. Sue till you're blue in the face. He told me that I could have a formal response by day's end, and then he told me to go away and let him finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord claiming ownership over the bank vault, I brought it downstairs and showed it to my client. How the hell did you do that? Trade secret, I said. The following month the restaurant moved out and the place was empty, and that was too bad because I had always liked eating at the vault. Now the restaurant was in a new location 20 minutes away. They called the new place the Vault, and they'd preserved the vibe of the old place. It was very similar, except they didn't have the bank vault. The bank vault, all 100 tons of it, was where it had already been, in the basement of the building where I rented space. I showed up for work a little after that, and Aaron collared me. The landlord's looking for you, he said. Oh yeah? What about? He's really angry. He said that his deal fell through. Deal? He was supposed to rent the place downstairs to a new tenant, a bank or a credit union or something like that. They were supposed to come in to sign a lease, but they didn't show up. And what's that got to do with me? I said to Aaron, and I said the same thing again to the landlord when he managed to track me down a couple days later. I know you were behind this, he said, his jowls quivering. I know it was you. That offer from the agent, it was all bullshit. Just a trick to make me keep the vault so that your client could sneak out of the place and leave that fucking bank vault behind. I'm gonna sue. If you're looking for counsel, I think I'm going to have to declare a conflict. I'm gonna sue the restaurant and that agent, and I'm gonna sue you. He stormed off. But the landlord didn't sue. Of course he didn't. He didn't have a contract to sue on, only a vague letter of intent that I'd drafted, enough to hook a greedy landlord who was used to having his way. The offer he'd received was non-binding, incapable of acceptance without signing of a formal lease, which, of course, he never signed. When I left Aaron's place a year later, the downstairs was still unoccupied, with a sad for rent sign sitting in the window, starting to look faded. Ooh, this story makes me very happy. Well done. Made me want to don a fedora and smoke a cigarette under a streetlight in the rain and recall the time I was slipped a Mickey Finn, some sweet-cheeked woman who knew the score whilst I was tailing the fat man. It reads like a guy noir, attorney at large. My fiancé cheated with several men, including a sex offender, so I took my revenge. By Revenge Served Cold, 8. I met my ex in 2012, right after I had just turned 30. I had only dated and been with women exclusively until I came out as bisexual at 28. Let's just say the year I was 29 was a busy year making up for what I missed out on. It was mostly casual hookups, yes, safe, and I did try dating 2 different guys for a few weeks, but it just never worked out or got serious. I kind of figured that I'd probably end up marrying a woman or not getting married at all because I just didn't see myself catching romantic and sexual feelings for a guy. Then I met Ryan. From the first date, it was just like the only other time in my life I'd fallen in love. Butterflies. Constantly thinking about him, wanting to spend every moment with him. He fell for me hard too, and we became an item. Though he did say while he considered my bisexuality a turn-on because he had a thing for straight guys, it also gave him pause because of my desires for the opposite sex and his concern it may lead me astray. I thought about it and understood it was a legitimate worry, but assured him that I couldn't even think about anyone else because I was really into him. No, I knew he was the only one by the end of the first month, and I was in love. But I wasn't going to say these things too soon and risk scaring him off. On our first date, he admitted to me that he was legally blind due to a genetic disorder and that it was progressive and eventually he would only have a sliver of his peripheral vision. He immediately said he understood if I didn't want to see him again because no other guy had wanted to date him and be his driver all the time. I grew up with a brother in a wheelchair who never learned how to walk or talk due to misdiagnosed meningitis at 6 months old back in the 70s. I told him that and said that what my brother had was a severe disability. So in my perspective, his blindness had no effect in my feelings and that always being the driver was a small sacrifice just to be with him. The following years were bliss. We brought out the best in each other. My family, who was surprised but very supportive when I came out, adored Ryan and treated him like family and said that I acted happier since we'd been together. When I met him, he was working part-time in retail and had done very poorly in high school because he lost a lot of confidence as his vision deteriorated. I told him that one thing I did insist on was that he do something with his life because he had too much to offer and that I would help. He said that he'd wanted to be a teacher but didn't think someone with limited vision could teach. Nonsense. So I put him through community college for 2 years, then 2.5 years of a local university, and finally the 1-year teacher certification program as required by California. I drove countless miles and paid hundreds in public transportation costs for him, never blinking an eye or complaining. We'd been together for 7.5 years and were engaged to be married in October by the time he was in his last semester of his teaching certification, which involved him student teaching at his former high school with his favorite teacher from his days in school. Then the pandemic hit and schools closed. Fortunately, he'd had enough hours in the classroom that he would still qualify to be certified after the governor issued a waiver via executive order. On the third day of the stay-at-home order in March, my life crumbled when I innocently found out he had cheated on me with an ex, all because he handed his phone to me to show me something on Instagram. I accidentally fat-thumbed the back arrow when he gave it to me, taking me back to a list of all his messages. I looked and recognized the name of his ex as the second message, dated a week ago. I clicked on it and my heart sank. Directions to my house, pictures, dirty talk, and reassuring him not to worry about me because he had my location on my Find My Friends just in case I came home from work. I immediately started screaming, demanding to know everything, and he admitted to having his ex over twice for sex and that they didn't use protection. His ex was engaged to his girlfriend during this, adding another victim. Then he admitted to sleeping with his straight but curiously recent single cousin by marriage, twice, again no protection. Finally, he admitted to sleeping with a supposedly straight guy he and many of my cousins went to school with, who I told Ryan I really didn't like him or want them talking because I didn't trust him after what I'd read about him. Since they were never close friends, I didn't feel like this was a big sacrifice or that I was being too controlling, and I assumed that he knew why I and all my cousins felt that way, but didn't bother repeating it. The reason was, after high school, at age 20, this guy was convicted of sexual assault and penetration with a foreign object against a 16-year-old girl and had gone to jail and required to register as a sex offender for life. Apparently, my ex was the only person in his graduating class that hadn't heard the news. All of this happened in my home while I was working. We spent the whole weekend crying, with me asking over and over why and him repeatedly crying and saying he just didn't know and that he felt terrible. Monday comes around and anger started being as common as sadness, and I made a comment that I said I was going to pull all the phone records going back the 3 years that AT&T kept them for a fee. Only when he heard that did he admit to one more guy, some random named Frankie off the gay hookup app Grindr, who was the first guy he cheated with and continued to casually hook up with for nearly 2 years, with the last time being in February, the month before. He told me how it started. Get this. It was the day after his graduation with his bachelor's in May 2018, and he was drunk from celebrating and wanted to have sex. I too had been celebrating with him, and I said I was too drunk to perform and said I'd make it up the next day. Then passed out asleep on the couch. Apparently he was angry horny because he downloaded Grindr, chatted with this Frankie fellow, and arranged to have sex in his car in a church parking lot across the street from our condo, which happens to be across the street from a school. This fact is important later. All while I slept on the couch. All the times they hooked up after that was again in my condo while I was working or visiting a friend for the night up the coast. He used to love going, but started saying he couldn't occasionally because of homework and studying. I absolutely lost it, told him to get in the car, and I drove him to his family's house so he could tell them what he did so they understood why he was moving back into their house. While he was in the house, I was in the driveway on the phone with AT&T ordering the 3 years worth of detailed call/text logs, then made an appointment to be screened for STIs. I suspended his service until he could figure out how to pay for his own damn phone. Then I temporarily changed all his passwords on the social media accounts he cheated with and to make sure he couldn't hide more evidence so only I would have access to his cloud. We shared each other's passwords on his suggestion years before. I also called the bank and issued a stop payment on his final tuition check that I had sent to the certification program the week before and hadn't hit the bank yet. Before deleting his social media except Facebook, I took screenshots of the entire Instagram conversation with his ex and mailed the conversation to his fiancée, who deserved to know so she could see a doctor and get tested too. His family was very religious and had kicked him out in high school for 3 days when he tried to admit that he was bi and only took him back in when he took it back. Needless to say, she ended it. He got kicked out. 1 down. He came back out to the car and we went home. I took his house key and told him to say goodbye to our 3 pets and get packing. The entire time he packed, I studied those phone records to find out dates, times, and if there was anyone else he was leaving out. He answered every question I asked, and it was then that I discovered that the sex offender and he had only had oral sex in my home, and that the actual sex was in the same parking lot he screwed the Frankie guy in. The wheels started turning, and the next day I walked over to the church and sure enough spotted a camera. I spoke to a secretary, sweet old lady, at the church and informed them about a registered sex offender having sex in their lot, and that not only was it a violation of his parole for indecent exposure, but that he was not allowed to be that close to school, and I provided the date. I was in luck. They had a digital 2-year loop system that started deleting day by day after it had been retained for 2 years. It was April 2020, and he first cheated with Frankie in May 2018, and the sex offender was in April 2019. I told them I was filing a police report and that probation would require a copy of it eventually. They said they would save the file and allowed me a thumb drive of both days to submit with my police report. Within a month, the sex offender was locked up again. 2 down. I also filed a police report against the Frankie guy. The police said it was a relatively minor infraction, but since it was across from a school playground and skate park, they would follow up, but there would be no jail time. I researched the hell out of Frankie and called him to confront him. He was smug and admitted to knowing about me the whole time. What he didn't know is that I had found out he had a job that required a security clearance, and he had several judgments against him, and collection agencies had been looking for him. Best money I ever spent on a data collection site. I didn't know why they couldn't find him and just garnish his wages, but it ends up he was Hispanic and had 2 last names and was a junior. Plus he frequently went by his middle name Francisco, Frankie for short, so he got lost in the paperwork confusion. I sent a letter to the collection agencies providing his employer and current location and contact info, and then sent a copy of the police report about misdemeanor indecent exposure for which he pled guilty, and it was a fine with community service, not considered a sex crime. His wages did get garnished, but only for 2 paychecks because the misdemeanor was enough for him to lose his security clearance and get fired. 3 down. Then I contacted Ryan's family on his mother's side, pretending to be him from his Facebook account, making sure they knew he had fucked his cousin. It spread through the family like wildfire, and soon his cousin was contacting me because he couldn't get a hold of Ryan to ask why he would expose what they did. I just laughed and said you shouldn't screw your cousins, especially when they're engaged, and he'd messed around in my house, so now it was my turn for payback. 4 down. Lastly, I had already stopped payment, but since he was so close to finishing, I was sure his family would bail him out and pay the university. Like I said, indecent exposure is usually a slap on the wrist type misdemeanor. However, I remembered some of the paperwork he signed to be a mandated reporter that you could lose teaching certification for documented acts of moral turpitude. I sent a copy of both police reports from the parking lot, still shots from the security footage clearly showing Ryan's face to the school district he'd been student teaching in, and a copy to the Commission on Teacher Credentials. 5th and final down. Admittedly, I did all of this out of anger, but he shattered my sense of self-worth and made me incredibly bitter and untrusting after years of being generous and supporting him. Everywhere I looked in the town, I thought of Ryan and the cheating. I felt a terrible energy in my condo knowing it all happened there. I stayed 9 months and watched all 5 of their lives self-destruct. then sold my condo, making a nice profit, and relocated to the PNW to over. One thing that is sad is I found out just recently that his ex, whose fiance broke up with him, ended up committing suicide several months after I moved. It is too bad that his family was so close-minded to turn on their own son, but in the end, it's not my fault that he cheated on his fiance by coming into my home and at my fiance's invitation to cheat. Suicide is never the answer to one's problems, and I hope the fiance he cheated on doesn't blame herself, and that only his family does. Too long didn't read. I emotionally and financially supported my ex through college and his teacher credential program for over 7 years, only to discover he had cheated on me with 4 different guys. One of them the day after he graduated, and then occasionally for nearly 2 years in my home while I was at work. I took my revenge. My ex lost his career before it even started in our relationship. One affair partner lost his job and had bill collectors after him. Another lost his fiance and was kicked out. A third was humiliated when his entire family found out he had sex with his cousin, and the fourth was put in jail for violating probation. Lesson: don't cheat and deceive, or fuck around and find out. Update for those that haven't seen the original post comment: yes, I did seek therapy. This was 4 years ago, and after 18 months of therapy, that didn't really help. I was referred to a newer therapy for PTSD called ketamine infusion therapy, and it was like magic. In 6 sessions over 3 weeks, I was relieved of all my pent-up anger and resentment and actually able to trust and date again. I am now happily married and settled in the PNW. That was so fucking sad, then so calculated and savage. Bro did the math. Nobody deserves to be betrayed and cheated on, and damn did you make sure he learned that lesson. Nuclear for sure. And the last story for the night. Married with Kids, Miserable and Want Out by Snoo Pandas 5943. Throwaway account. My 45 male wife, 40 female, have been married for 15 years and have 2 boys. I never wanted kids to begin with, but when my wife's biological clock reached the point of near no return, we decided to have not just 1, but 2 kids, both times reluctantly giving in for me. Ever since having kids, our house is a mess day in and day out, and it's making me feel miserable and depressed. We both work full-time. My wife works at the office and therefore commits an additional 1.5 hours a day for commute, and I work virtually from home. I bring the kids to school, pick them up from school. I do everyone's laundry, vacuuming, cleaning the bathrooms, and general outdoor maintenance like shoveling snow, mowing the lawn. I make sure the kids are fed in the mornings and prepare dinner, as well as help the kids with homework while my wife is commuting home. I feel like I carry the load when it comes to handling the kids. I'm at a point where I feel miserable about the house being a mess, and I don't feel like my wife is carrying her load. Not to mention her cleaning habits leave much to be desired, to say the least, and I find myself even cleaning up after her. It's like I have been the family servant ever since we had kids, as everything seems to revolve around their schedule. All the hobbies and goals I wanted to pursue before having kids are either out of reach or no longer achievable. Yet I never wanted kids in the first place. I feel like since the kids were an extension of her sudden changed mind to have kids and me feeling pressured to give in to that, then everything that I'm doing for the kids should be taken by her as me going above and beyond what I signed up for. But she never actually appreciates me for anything of these things that I'm doing. I will say that she is the main breadwinner, plans their social events and play dates, childcare both during summer and during school year, family finances, groceries, and she does use her vacation time on a bi-weekly basis to bring them to all medical, dental, and mental health appointments. But at home, she just doesn't lift a finger at all. To further complicate things, I've recently started using whatever is left on my own time to play games and engage in an online community. I eventually became friends with the woman in this community who I feel understands and appreciates me and validates everything I'm feeling. And I'm finding that I simply don't have the same connection with my wife because of years of resentment. My wife and I don't do much together anymore between kids' activities and sleep schedules. I have been spending more and more time with my friend online, watching movies together, playing games, and I admittedly also have disclosed some, not all, issues about my marriage to her. That said, this woman does not currently work, is single, and does not have kids, so I recognize that any comparison to wife is unfair. But she makes me feel so important and heard, and is much more fun to converse with. While I'm not sure if the feelings are mutual, nor do I realistically believe I would pursue anything serious with this woman, even if I was single, this whole situation is making me question my own merits and compatibility with my wife, and whether I should stay in it. Obviously, I know this is a bad situation to be in, yet it's hard to get out of after going unheard of for so long. Has anyone been in this situation? Am I being unreasonable for my resentment towards my wife for changing her mind to have kids, not playing her weight at home and wanting out of this relationship as a result? On the other hand, advice is welcome on how to get out of this miserable yet guilty position I'm in. Damn, OP, you fucking suck. When you say your wife handles scheduling all events / social activities, childcare, finances, grocery shopping, and using her earned PTO not for herself but to take the kids to appointments, why do you feel like she is not carrying her load? She works full time, commutes, and still does all you listed above. Also has no free time either for her own hobbies and interests. I obviously am only getting a partial picture of your relationship dynamic, but unfortunately you made this decision twice to have children, and it seems like the duties are split up quite logically. If she is only home for a few hours in the evening, it makes sense that she would not get to the laundry and vacuuming. She has to go home and be a mom too. You seem to be already emotionally cheating on your wife. I would take the time to reflect on it if you want to stay in the marriage or not. If you divorce, at least you could set up your preferred custody agreement at that point and get some time off from your dad duties. And also, the grass isn't always greener. The person who you feel validates you and makes you feel understood also stays home and plays video games without having other responsibilities. It sounds like they have a lot of free time to be able to cater to you in that way. It really feels like you want to be with someone who will take care of you and only care about you and make you their priority, which is completely valid and you deserve to have what you want. But it's unfair to expect from your wife, who is already working, commuting, doing things for your home and relationship, and still also raising these children you both decided to have. Alright, that's the end of the video, folks. If you liked the video, leave a like and drop a comment down below. Which story was your favorite? Would you like to see more of these videos? Tell me in the comments. If you have a story you'd like me to narrate, contact me via the email in the description. Don't forget to check out my subreddit r/SPNsAnthonyum, where I post all of my horror writing. And more. My name is In It for the Spooks, and don't forget to stay spooky. Okay, bye.